Hello and welcome back to the Tin Barn. I'm Pragmatic Lee, and in today's video we're going to start the build process of a steady rest to go with my lathe. Now when I got the lathe about 7.5 years ago, I guess it's been now, it came with a steady rest that I used a couple of times, but the last time I used it, probably 4 or 5 years ago, I made a mistake and I crashed the steady rest into the chuck. I had it between the carriage and the chuck, and I had finished work with the steady rest, but instead of breaking everything down and taking the steady rest off, I said, okay, I'll just leave it there and let the cross slide, or let the carriage push the steady rest up to a point, being careful not to crash it into the chuck. Well, guess what? I got distracted. I think a chip might have flew off, went down my shirt. Something distracted me for just a second, but in that second, the carriage pushed the steady rest into the chuck, and you can imagine what it did to that cast iron steady rest. This is what the steady rest looked like before the crash. Of course, it had the 3 fingers in there, but when it crashed into it, it broke this off. Now, if it had broke at some point other than where one of the fingers was, I would probably look into having that brazed or put back together. But being right in there, less than just a little over a 1/4 inch, maybe 3/8 there, not a lot left to weld and then grind back out for that. So like I say, what I think I want to do is try to build a new steady rest. I've got some 1 inch thick by 6 inch flat bar that I'm going to use to make it out of. In today's video, what I want to do though is concentrate on just the base portion down here. It'll be 2 pieces. I'll have the base, and then I'll use a piece of that 6 inch stock for the upright. Again, in today's video, we're going to just concentrate on this base. I've cut out a piece. This is 1 inch thick, 4 1/4 wide, which I believe is about 2 inches. Yeah, it was 2 inches originally. It's 1.9 now. I think that's about the same. This is actually 1.95. So very, very close to the same size as this original base back here. And what I want to do in today's video is cut this V out. Mill this V out right here. When we turn over to the mill, I'll show you the question in my mind as far as which is going to be the best way to do it. I've never really done a V like that. I've made V blocks, but this is going to need to be that where it sets on the lathe, this top surface is level. So the depth of this V in here, 90-degree V, needs to be pretty close on. Of course, we're dealing with a steady rest, so we got lots of room inside in here to adjust the fingers. But what I'll do first is try to mill out the V in here. Then we'll take this relief out right here. We'll take it out of the piece, set it across the ways on the lathe, and run a indicator across it to see if it's setting flat. Now, if I don't get this exactly the correct depth, I want to get it too deep, if anything, because if I get it too deep, I'll be able to come down to the corresponding foot on the other side or on this piece and grind off or mill off a little bit of that foot. If this is setting down a little bit deep in the V, I can again grind this side down or mill that side down. If this is setting up, I would have to put it back in the mill and try to cut it deeper. So let's turn over to the mill now. Okay, we're turned over to the mill now, and the question I had in my mind as I was planning this project ahead of time was, do I mount the workpiece flat in the vise, of course on a set of parallels, and tilt the mill head over 45 degrees and cut the V, or do I set this up, workpiece up at 45 degrees to the vise, which of course would be complement 45 degrees to the mill, and do it that way? I think I'm going to go with this. Now, I don't have a problem tilting the mill head. It is a bit of an ordeal to get it trammed back in afterwards, but it's trammed now, and the only disadvantage I can see to doing it this way, well, maybe two. One, I don't have quite as much holding grip on the workpiece as I would if it was setting flat. And secondly, if I have to bring it back to the mill and cut this V deeper, then it'd be a little bit harder to replicate this setup than it would be setting flat. But in the inverse of that, if I tilt this up, I've got to get it to 45 degrees, get it accurate. Then when I get done, I got to get it back and get it trimmed vertical, perpendicular to the workbench. So I think I'm going to go this way. First thing I'm going to do, I've got my little protractor set on 45 degrees. Let's find a good way. I think I'm going to have to go 45 on the other side. And we'll start with setting it up with this. Now, I'm not sure if you can see it in the camera, but the V is going to start about 1/8 of an inch off the edge here. And I have laid out, I used a depth micrometer and got the depth of the V on the old broken steady rest, and I transferred that to over here. Now, while I was doing that, I set this V block down in the V on the broken steady rest, and that V was not a 45 degree angle. It's you know, well, let me show you. This is a little more than 90 degrees right here, and that surface is really, it's not nearly machined as well as the piece we're going to be using. But again, I have to keep reminding myself, this is a steady rest. You set it on the lathe, you clamp it down, and then you get your workpiece centered in the hole, even if the hole isn't exactly center. So I think I can build this. If you never see any more parts to this series, you'll know I failed at it, but I'll show them as well. Now, to double check this angle, I'm going to take my little angle cube right here, turn it on, and zero it out with the vise. Now let's come over to here, and that is 44.85. Let's try. Oops, needs to go down. That's dead nuts on 45. All right, let's get that good and tight. And that stayed on 45. going to stay off this line just a little bit to begin with. But this being, of course, 90 degrees on the flat here, we should be able to just keep moving down. In the end, we're going to wind up having to take a little bit off over here. And as I said earlier, I just want to be sure I go, if I do anything not exact to the point, I want it to be that I go a little bit deep here. And if I do go a little bit deep and this doesn't set level across the ways, after we take this relief out in here, I can just mill down or grind down this surface over here just a little bit to get it level. If this is not deep enough, I'll have to come back to the mill and cut more. All right. And I am not going to take a whole lot at the time. Again, I'm held in the vise pretty good, but I just don't want to take a chance of kicking it out. I'm using a 1/2 inch roughing end mill here. We'll see what the finish looks like when we get towards the end and we get ready to move over to the line. And if the surface for this roughing end mill is not clean enough, we'll put a standard 4-flute end mill in. I'm just checking to be sure there that I've got of the 3 axes on the mill, X, Y, and Z. Anytime you're milling something like this, you want to be sure the 2 axes you're not moving on are secured. So I've locked down the X, and the Z is locked as well. All right, that looks very close to the mark, but as I've said a couple times already, if anything, I want it to go, want this side to be too deep. So let's go about, I don't know, 40 more thousandths. All right, we're going to leave that depth right there, but as I said at the beginning, I set off this mark just a little bit. So let's start working our way in. Move over. See, that was 100 thousandths. Let's back up and try just 50. Take just, I don't know, we'll try about 20 more thousandths there. All right, now let's move over just a little bit and get this little bit of a shelf that was left here. A little bit of a burr and a shelf. Now I think I'll take a V-block that I know has got a good 90 degree on it. That is, I couldn't ask for any better than that. And that is a good enough finish on there as well. Okay, I think what I want to do now is get set up to cut this relief out of the center. Alright, I've got it deburred, and I've laid out where I want to mill this relief out in the center. This is close to what the other one was, about 1.25 inches from each end. So we'll set this up in the mill. And again, this was another reason I didn't want to tilt the mill head. I don't have to go back now and retram that. I can just go ahead with the project. And I'm going to zero out the Z-axis right there. I want to go 250 thousandths deep. I'm going to start out here. There's just 40 on the plunge. Get my X-axis set so that I'm on that line. Alright, and as much material as we've got to take out here, I think I'm going to go ahead and get the coolant going on this. Alright, let's go down, I don't know, about 80 more thousandths. Okay, it looks like that's going to bring us up to our mark, so this should be the last cut for this depth relief. Okay, that looks like what we were looking for. Now I think while I'm set up right here, I'll go ahead and put a small end mill in and cut this relief that's in the bottom of the V. Okay, I've got a 3/16 end mill in now, and I'm just using my eye to get that centered. It looks like it's cutting about the same on each side. We'll go down to about find the bottom of our V. Just a little more. And I think I'll just use some cutting oil on this. That looks good. Alright, before I take the workpiece out of the mill vise, we got one more step, and that's to drill a hole. As such, it's I'm sure it's a metric. I'm using a 31/64, just a little smaller than a half. I've already got the position laid out, so let's get us a starter hole in. Alright, I think we're finished at the mill now. If I have to take this down a little bit to get it level, I'll do that on the surface grinder. So I'm going to carry this piece over to the Scotch-Brite wheel, deburr these last edges, and probably stop at the little drill press and countersink this hole just a little bit. Okay, we're turning around now facing the end of the lathe. This is our piece we've just finished on the mill. Carried it over, deburred it, countersunk that hole a little bit. Now what I was talking about with if this V was not deep enough, what it would do is set this up so that end was higher than this end. If I got it too deep or deeper than level, this end is going to be a little bit high. But the plan was that if it was high down here, I could grind off just a little of this. Not enough to take it out of its 90 degree there. Alright, so let's see. I'm going to take a couple 1, 2, 3 blocks and just use them to bridge across the ways, or use them to raise up the level of the ways, and I'll use some wide parallels to bridge across. And I probably need to bring this height up just a little bit with another parallel. Let me try this right quick. Yeah, you see my gauge, height gauge, is bottoming out there, so I need to bring up a little bit more. If this is within 10 to 15 thousandths, I'll be plenty happy with that. Again, I don't want to grind a whole lot and mess up the 90 degree match over here. Alright, let's pull this up out of the way. Get it close by. Now we'll push that down, and I'm not bottoming out right here. So I'm going to lock that in place. Turn it around to where I can see the dial, and it's set on 0. Set and locked on 0 right there. So let's raise this back up. Of course, that takes the dial off of 0. Come down here to this end. Lock down so it don't move when I pick it up. And we're at 14 thousandths high on this end. So I'm going to carry it to the surface grinder and take about 10 thousandths off of this. I'll not carry the camera over there because it's pretty much just the same thing, but I'll set it here, 0 out, and take off about 10 or 12 thousandths. Okay, I said I wasn't going to bring the camera over here, and I didn't bring the camera I was using. This is being recorded with my iPhone. Have no idea what the sound or the video is going to turn out like. I've got it zeroed out. Let's see if we can get about 10 thousandths off of this. I got a couple thousandths on the zeroing. Okay, that using the iPhone would probably work fine, except for the fact that I didn't have a way to hold it up, and it fell and hit the floor, but thankfully it's not a concrete floor, and it didn't hurt the phone. Anyhow, we got, after touching off, which probably took a couple thousandths, I took 6 more thousandths off according to the dial. So let's set that back in now. There's not a bit of rock in that. Really pleased with that. Do the same setup. Just touch it down. And again, I will lock the height right there and then set the gauge or set the dial to 0. Release the height, pull it back up, and double check. And that's within a couple thousandths, so that's fine. Let's try that again right quick. Lock that down. Dead on 0. Alright, we'll come to this end. Lock it down and see how close our dial is to 0. Can you see that? It's 2 thousandths difference. I think that is perfectly fine for this piece. So I think we're finished with the base to our steady rest now. Seems to fit fine. Orientation of that hole is the same as what the original one was, in that it's on the chuck side. Now in subsequent videos we'll start working on this upper part up here, the rest itself. But I think that's going to do it for today's video. Hope you enjoyed it and got a little bit out of seeing me cut that V-groove in there and doing the relief, drilling the hole, and then getting it parallel with the ways. Take care, and I'll see you on the next video.